Good morning. Welcome to the CSLDallas Science of Mind class, whether you're in person or online. It is so lovely to be together on a beautiful fall morning. I don't know how it is where you are, wherever you are. It's a little slow this morning here. It's quiet, and it's lovely to think about that the quietness of fall as the leaves begin to fall and things begin to settle down. And it feels a little bit that way this morning. So we are carrying on here with this really interesting section. We're on page 127. We're in the middle of this little section called the destructive use of the law. And it can be a little challenging to wrap our minds around just how neutral the universal principle is. The universal laws that we use are no different than the natural laws. And this is one of the ways in which metaphysicians understand how all of this works. If we go all the way back to the ancient Hermetic teachings, as above, so below, then so below is an outpicturing of as above. And many of the New Thought and metaphysical thinkers in the last few hundred years have been inspired by looking into nature. Darwin looked into nature and found an intelligence and an order. Alexander Humboldt, who the Humboldt current is named after, right? He was the one who climbed a mountain in South America, and he saw the orderly. He was the one who created the zones that you plant in. If you're planting in zone 1, or you want to know if a plant can live in Dallas or wherever you are, and you go to the garden center and it says, oh, this is from zone 4 to zone 8, right? That's because Alexander Humboldt stood on the top of a mountain, or maybe not quite all the way at the top because it was snowbound, in South America, and he realized that the vegetation was growing in the same bands as they were growing in the mountains he had climbed in the Alps and the mountains that he had climbed in the Himalayas. And he saw an intelligence and an orderliness. And the scientists of that era really talked, many of them, about looking into nature and recognizing that is where spirit is expressing itself in these orderly processes of life and creation, and that there's something beyond our somewhat limited understanding of what's going on. There's something much larger. And of course, at that point, we had disembedded ourselves in many ways from the religious ideas, the spiritual ideas, that were answering all the questions, right? The answer was always God. Well, how did it happen? God. Well, how does it work? God. Well, what's going on? Well, God has decided, created, rewarding, punishing, somehow outpicturing, right? And so the science, while it disembedded us from that, actually gave us nature back as a representation. And I think it was Meister Eckhart who said, the very first scripture is actually written in nature. And so we extrapolate from the fact that there are natural laws, we extrapolate from that's a reflection of the lawfulness of the infinite, of the lawfulness of the transcendent mystery, of the lawfulness of that which is actually the impulse and the creative force that brings this infinite oneness into creation, into expression. And unlike what we maybe have grown up with in the Old Testament or the Hebrew portions of the Bible that were very much influenced by this idea that the answer is always God, right? That there's a a reward and a punishment, right? In nature, there's no reward or punishment. There's simply the outpicturing of the lawful manner in which things operate. So if a seed falls on the ground and it doesn't get sunlight, the seed dies. Not because it was a bad seed, not because it chose to be in the wrong place, not for any other reason than the seed won't germinate if it gets no sunlight. If it falls on the wrong place, if it falls in the wrong, in an area, or it's carried off by an animal, and it's not dropped in a place that is fertile for it, it won't grow. And so by extrapolating from the natural laws, we come to the way spiritual laws work. And the challenge, right, for us is that they are impartial and automatic. They are, in that case, we might say they are unself-conscious, unthinking, unfeeling, operations of the way the universe works. And this is a really challenging, sometimes really challenging thing for us to get a hold of. It doesn't mean that the trajectory of life isn't for good, right? The impulse of life is to move life forward, is for life to forever be expressing. And so the trajectory, or we could say the teleology of life, is towards more life. But the processes themselves are not conscious in the way that we think of as picking and choosing. So we come to this idea of the destructive use of the law. And it's a challenging thing to wrap our minds around. There's no guarantee that the universal law is being used constructively. How many of us have used it in our own lives unconsciously and have had outcomes that were different than we would have said we wanted? But with the unconscious use of the law that is always going on, it might not be purposefully destructive, purposefully malevolent, but it doesn't necessarily always outpicture in the way that we would say we want, we think we want. This destructive use of the law is possible because the law can't change the impress that it's receiving or the directionality. And so I sometimes see metaphysicians say, well, this, or unless spirit has a better idea. The universe has no better idea than the idea that we give it. Unless we leave it alone, right? Life on its own will always be for life, but that doesn't mean there aren't volcanoes and hurricanes and die-offs and the diseases that take over whole hillsides of trees, right? But all of it is a part of the regenerative cycle. In the long run, life is always for life. Consequently, Ernest Holmes writes, no person who is enlightened would seek to use the law destructively, for he would know that sooner or later the very power set in motion by himself would ultimately destroy him. And so this becomes the way in which we can think of the fact that while we can use the law destructively, we are using it, or we're using it unconsciously. It's in cross purposes to the way life is going, to the unfolding of life. All they that take the sword shall perish by the sword is the biblical quote that Ernest Holmes uses here, right? And we know that as we believe, it's done unto us. So yes, we can put things out into the law that are not in alignment with life, but ultimately, if we believe that things are awful, horrible, that we have to make something different happen, that we have to get ours before anybody else can get theirs, do you see? Then that becomes the way we think life works. And so everybody is trying to get theirs before we get ours. And it's creates a destructive use of the law. But the law can't say, wait, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What's going on? Why are you doing this? Don't you know that you're out of alignment? Right? The universal laws don't do that. They can't do that. Just like electricity can't say, if you don't put your finger there, you're going to get shocked. The electricity can't say, you've crossed your wires, be careful, you're going to burn your house down. It just does what it does. And so this second part of this paragraph, right, is a really interesting thing for us to think about if we are resonating with these terms. The Spirit of Christ is the Spirit which constructively uses the law. The spirit of Antichrist is the destructive use of the law. The Spirit of Christ, being in line with the cosmic life, will always transcend, neutralize, destroy, and utterly obliterate the spirit of the Antichrist. Finally, only the Spirit of Christ can succeed. And so this is the promise that despite the fact that the law is unconscious in the way that we think of as self-conscious, not that it doesn't have intelligence or no, despite the fact that the law has to take whatever it's given, the trajectory of life is actually for life. And ultimately, that trajectory is what pulls us through. Why are we talking about this morning, besides the fact that it's in the book? Is because there's a lot of discomfort about how this is playing out in our country and in the world. A lot of use of the law that is very deliberately bringing about a certain point of view, which may ultimately be quite destructive. We've stuck our head in the sand around climate change. We're not talking about it. We are seeing a whole political system created that has only one particular point of view, which may actually have very destructive outpicturings in the short term. And how are we going to hold that, right? It's something we're going to talk about also this morning in our celebration. How are we going to hold that? And sometimes I hear metaphysicians say, well, God's in that too. Yes, God is in the way that the law works. But we have to always pull out of that, right, the way in which the law is being activated. Is it being activated in alignment with the larger trajectory of life? Or is it being activated from our own personal agendas, choices, fears, doubts, or certainty about how it is and how it must be, or just for our own personal good? These are the kinds of things that have always, in the science of mind, been applied individually. Since the beginning of New Thought and in early metaphysics, it was always about my growth, my life, my consciousness, my use of the law, my demonstrations. And you see, we have become good at a lot of that. And now we're recognizing that humanity as a whole has a belief system, has a way of seeing life, that groups of people also are creating sets of beliefs that are outpicturing in the law, because that's how the law works. And we're beginning to recognize that the consciousness of the collective is as important as the consciousness of the individual. And as we are doing our work to grow our consciousness, to more spiritually align with this Christ consciousness, we have the opportunity of seriously impacting and shifting how humanity or any particular group of people, what's in that consciousness. And that is, that's the maturing, I think, of New Thought and the Science of Mind, that we recognize that we're not in this alone. We're not, and we're not absolved of the fact that our consciousness is contributing. And so that's one of the places where we get to look in ourselves. How am I responding? How am I reacting? What am I thinking? What am I assuming? Am I becoming fearful, doubtful? Am I villainizing other people? Am I doing exactly what other people are doing to me, right? Where's the high road that doesn't mean we're not engaged, or we're putting our head in the sand, or we're not participating, or we're not contributing? Because we are, just with our thought processes, we're contributing to what the law is operating on. And so when we don't like the outcomes of something, if we are in the side of not liking the outcome of this particular political election, we also get to recognize that this is the revelation of consciousness. This is the law playing out, not the physical human laws, right? But the revelation of the consciousness that is still being carried. And what's our part? How much are we contributing to that? And how much are we working to shift that consciousness by staying committed to where our consciousness rests? Of course, this is challenging work, right? Especially if we have feelings, human feelings. We are spirit human. Our feelings are important. They're real. They have to be expressed. They have to be felt. So in our celebration, we're going to talk about how do we find a place to stand with all of this. But this morning in the class, we're thinking about what does it mean that this law is so impartial? I don't always like the word impersonal. It's impartial and it's automatic. And how do we get a hold of that to use it both for ourselves and in the larger sense? So we're going to stop there. Oh, let me just say one more thing. I don't particularly care for the use of the word Christ and Antichrist in this paragraph, because it does to me slightly anthropomorphize the law, as if all of a sudden we have a good law and a bad law. We have a loving law and an evil law, right? Because the law is evil because it's the Antichrist. No. So it's challenging. These can be really challenging. Sometimes the language can provide a subconscious interaction in our minds with images or thoughts, and we want to be careful about how we're taking that in. So sometimes I wish Ernest Holmes would not use those terms, but he did, and here they are. All right. Ryan, we're going to say good morning to you and good morning to those people out there in the ethers, and see what's going on.
Well, thank you, Dr. Petra, and good morning to you, and good morning to everybody here on campus and all the folks around the world watching us. Special shout out to Dr. Tracy Brown. She wrote in the comments that she's sipping a cup of tea and going down the Nile.
I know. Tracy, I can't wait to be there with you next week, or well, not with you, but there, but we're happy you're online.
We'll be there all together. Absolutely. So this is an engaging conversation, and we encourage you to participate. For the folks here in the room, just simply raise your hand. Wave it like you just don't care. Can I see it one time? All right. There we go. Just making sure everybody's alive out there. And for the folks that are joining us on Zoom and on Facebook Live, you can always put your questions and comments inside of the chat, and I can bring those into the room. And for the folks that are on Zoom, you can hit the raise your hand icon located down below, and I can call you into the room. Now, I do like to remind folks, even though I did call out Tracy Brown for this, but I do like to remind
we love our
folks,
Tracy Brown, so you can call her out. It's okay.
You know, we have a special love for Tracy Brown over here. But I do like to keep the rest of the questions anonymous. That way we can have a safe container for spiritual growth. So I do have a question online.
Yeah, great.
And then we'll go here into the audience and see what comes up.
Yes.
All right. It says, how can life always be for life if what is put into the law is not for life? Can the lawful outpicturing, I'm going to say this a different way, can the lawful outpicturing be for destructiveness?
Yes, this is the problem of free will. Right? Right, slammed right up against it. Thank you for bringing that question in, because it is what has to be presenced into the room. So, if we look at nature, we see the destructive use of the law. We see things that look terribly destructive. Hurricanes, volcanoes, droughts, floods. But the recognition that all of these things actually bring rebalancing and equilibrium to the system. Hurricanes are required because they bring a rebalancing to the to the earth-wide weather systems. The lava flows because there's a shift in the tectonic plates or in the way in which the magma is pushing up from underneath, and the pressure has to be released. And when it does that, when the volcano blows, actually an equilibrium is restored. The same thing with the floods. The thing that we forget is that out of that destruction, right, all of life grew in its originality, originally, once it came out of the seas, grew on soil that was produced by the volcanoes 4 million years ago, or 4 billion years ago, whenever it was, that the Earth's crust was being formed. Volcanic lava it turns into some of the most fertile soil. And it is the beginning of the creation of soil in which life grows. Rivers flood, and they enrich the soil. River valleys that have a natural river that is flooding on a regular basis, those valleys are so much more fertile because it requires the replacement of everything that the trees and the grass and whatever we might be growing there pulls out of the soil. It all has to be given back into the soil. That's what the floods do, right? So we call it destructive, but we see in the long run that there's a constant regeneration. Even the falling of trees in beautiful old-growth forests, barring human interference, right? The falling of the trees, they're even talking about that the matriarch tree, once she realizes that enough of her seedlings have grown, she actually purposefully gives up her own life, falls to the ground so that the seedlings can reach for the light. And that log that has fallen, it becomes a nursery log. They call it a nurse log. And seeds fall on it, and they immediately have what they need from the rotting log so that they grow, which is why when you go into old-growth forests, sometimes it looks like the trees have been planted, right? It's because they've fallen onto nurse logs. And so in the physical outpicturing, in the space-time continuum, we see how through these seasons and cycles, the trajectory is for life. It's always about growing life. When the dinosaurs became extinct, what happens? That's what allowed mammals to grow. That's what allowed that life form to take off, right? And so whatever we might look at and say, oh, that's destructive, there's always an opportunity for regrowing, new growth, and life continues. So it is through this constant evolving expression of life that we see this trajectory outpictured. Now, the challenge, of course, is that hurricanes and lava flows and forest fires are they're part of this whole process. It's the law outpicturing, working to bring equilibrium back into the systems. And then we have the problem of free will, right? we can actually choose to do it on purpose. That's the challenge, right? We can choose to do it on purpose unconsciously, automatically. I was abused, therefore I turn around and become an abuser. That's a classic example of it. I'm unconsciously playing out the patterns of my childhood. Or we say, no, wait, just because there's an unconscious pattern there, I can choose to do it differently. Do you see? In that moment, that's where we begin to access the fact that we do, in fact, have free will. And so we can make messes. I would hate to have to catalog the number of messes that I have made in my teenage years, in my 20s. Oh my goodness. All because I was exercising my ability to choose. Now, good enough, over time, some of those choices, right, that's what happens. We get the outpicturing of the choice and we go, wait, that's not a very good idea. That didn't play out the way I wanted it to play out. And maybe we become enlightened. And maybe we don't. So this is the problem of free will. We have to be let alone to discover that as conscious beings, we now are co-creating. And we can, in fact, make messes. And if you look at the history of the human race, we have over and over and over and over and over and over and over again made messes, just as we have in our own lives. And if you look at the history of humanity as a whole, there is a long, steady, constant rejuvenation, renewal, and forward movement overarchingly in humanity. And that is the trajectory of life. So we can cut across it, we can derail it, we can divert it, we can absolutely create destructive outpicturings, destructive events, use it destructively, but the long-term trajectory is life always seeking to find ways to continue to be about life. And for life to do that, there has to be a steady, ongoing trajectory in that direction. Yeah. This is one of the classic fundamental questions that you have to wrestle with and you have to begin to work with for yourself as well. Are we willing to take responsibility for the fact that we make messes? That we choose things that are not in our best interest? That we choose things for ourselves, not thinking about the impact, either on others or, quite frankly, the long-term impact on ourselves. Or sometimes we choose things thinking it's the right thing to do, and then we get the feedback of the demonstration, and we go, "Oh, no, that wasn't it." And so our consciousness and our choices are constantly being educated. But it's not reward and punishment. You did something bad, so you're going to be punished, or you did something good, and you're going to be rewarded. Oh, you're in alignment with life, therefore this is your reward. No, you're in alignment with life, therefore life and you are moving in the same direction. Should actually make it easier. Do you see? And that's where we then get into this idea of the impersonalness, the automatic nature of the law. All right, I know everybody needs more coffee. Our room is very quiet. We got a hand here.
We'll go here into the room,
and then
I have someone online.
Perfect.
All right, go ahead, JL.
Hi, I'm JL. So I was able to live through Hurricane.
Hey, can you make sure the microphone is turned on? Hold that button.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
My name is JL. I had the luxury of living through Hurricane Katrina. And I think several years ago, if you told me about the soil, I would have been like, I don't care about soil, preacher. You know, I don't care about that part of things. You know, I want life to be the same. I want I want my home back and the neighborhoods back and the people back. And it changed life so drastically. But the beauty of co-creating with the universe is that there was a lot of choices being made to move forward because life still goes on.
Yeah.
After disasters, after you lose loved ones, after COVID, like life had to keep going. After this election, life has to keep moving, right? And so we get to make choices that will reflect where our consciousness is.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm thankful to be able to look back on things and realize that, I am where I am now because of my consciousness, because of co-creating with the universe. Life seemed really dark at those times, but we get past it because life moves forward.
Yes, and thank you, JL. What a beautiful representation, right? Because life does still move forward. And we're always at choice about then how we're going to handle it. And I loved what you said. It changed. Everything changes. And so this is something that I think is always really fascinating. We teach and we practice a spirituality that talks about transformation, but we want to use our spirituality to keep everything the same. And it pisses us off when things change. But we should have less unconscious changes, but we can't avoid the fact that life does in fact change. Things do happen. There are pandemics and there are things like this that are going on. What we can do is have less unconscious ones, and we can have less human created ones. And that's where our engagement, our choices, right, that's where our free will comes in. What am I going to choose now that this has happened? How am I going to take it up? Where am I going to go from here? What am I going to stand on? All of those things. And I think that's a huge opportunity that we have. And yes, that in those moments, it's darkest. It is. And it's cruel, I think, to say that it's not. We're not saying it doesn't happen. We're not saying it didn't happen. We're not saying we don't have those feelings. We're not saying that whether or not those feelings are justified. None of that, right? All of that is the real experience. The question always is at some point where we say, now what? How do I move from here? And that's in that moment. Viktor Frankl says, right, the gap between stimulus and response. In that moment, that's where our choice lives, right there. And sometimes we do that better than others. Sometimes we respond more quickly. Sometimes we're not ready yet. All of that is completely okay. It's all a part of who okay in our experience.
And maybe we need less attachment.
Maybe we need less attachment to the way things are. But I like it. I've worked very hard to have it be the way it is. I don't want it to change, right? Oh, wait, but I live a transformative philosophy. It's so annoying. It's so annoying. But we tend to want to use our spirituality to hold it, and everything's perfect. Look at, I've manifested this, and this. Don't anybody breathe. Don't anybody move. Yeah. And inevitably, it's going to change. How do we know that? Okay, just look at a year. The seasons, Things grow, they bloom, they blossom, they create harvest, and they die back so that something else can grow, or they can grow. I mean, the one thing we know about the space-time continuum is embedded in the fabric of the space-time continuum is change. Right. All right, so we have a comment online, or somebody wants to make a comment online, and then we have a comment here in the room.
All right, Marjorie, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and join us.
Good morning, Marjorie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here this morning. I was just reading the passage there on page 127, and it talks about the deconstruction, or the destructive, and I'm kind of, wanting to kind of use a more nuanced language of deconstruction rather than destruction. So I think destruction is like taking a hammer to something, wanting to smash it all to pieces, and the motivation might be out of revenge or anger or power over someone else, that sort of thing, to destruct something. But to deconstruct something is more intentional, and it's like a meticulous and intentional taking apart of something, because we know that there's something there to be either learned or unlearned, and that we want something to emerge, something good to emerge from this deconstruction. So I kind of think, we can play with these words that Ernest Holmes wrote 100 years ago and kind of add a little nuance, or maybe change things around to help, at least for me, it helps to kind of place it into a more co-creative. In other words, the opposites of creating and destroying dance with each other, or my humanity and my divinity dances with each other.
Yes.
In co-creation with spirit to create something brand new that has not existed before.
Yes. Truthfully, it's lovely, Marjorie.
Unconscious.
Yep.
It's always going to be there. That's the hidden part that we can't see or we don't know, the unknown. And that plays in as well. So it brings a little more complexity into it, which makes it more interesting and makes it a little bit, takes a little bit less of the potential dogma out of our older understanding of the natural laws, the way we, explicated a certain understanding of it 100 years ago. We might be able to extrapolate those same universal principles and bring in a current understanding of how these principles might be applied in today's world.
Beautiful, thanks. And everything that you shared is beautiful, and it requires someone to be conscious, right? To be conscious of their choices. And so then we can do that, which is a really lovely thing to do. If I were consciously engaged in this, I might see absolutely that when I make a choice towards something different, that which I had before is going to die. It's going to go away, right? And the tension between those things, especially if we're going from good to great, right? Not just running away from something we don't like, but to say, this is good, and I'm going to deconstruct it because I see something better, or I see something more, or I see the next evolution, which actually means I have to let this go, which can feel like death, destruction, right? And I love in the Hindus we have Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, right? The creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. And the destroyer, and in New Thought, we have this knee-jerk reaction to destroyer. Oh my God, it's negative, it's bad, it's awful. And exactly, Marjorie, as you're talking about, the destroyer is breaking it down so that new creation can come, so that we can be in this cycle. And it's lovely to play with the language. It's always lovely, which is why I play with the language Christ and Antichrist. Just doesn't work for me because it too anthropomorphizes it. And so create, like we've moved from create to co-create, because we recognize that we're using a law to create. We aren't actually the creators. We're actually the makers of the idea, and it's the law that then brings it into being. So the more nuanced we can become, the more fully we can really not be afraid to engage in the thought process. We can take it to a higher level. and a higher understanding. And so thank you so much, Marjorie. All right, we have a comment in the room. Good
Right.
morning. Please say your name.
My name is Titus. Hi, everybody. I guess it's a thought and a question in regards to change and us making choices. And I guess the question is more so, if we make a choice, but we get something we don't want, is it possible that that unpreferred experience is really pushing us to the preferred experience?
Well, so I am never going to give consciousness to the law. No, I think it pushes you to the preferred experience because you get the outcome and you're like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was. This isn't what I thought I wanted. This didn't play out the way I expected. And so it's actually our choices that are being educated. And it's not necessarily between good and bad. It might be between, this is what my culture teaches me I should want. I'm going to manifest it. And then I go, well, wait, that's not fulfilling. Or this is how I observed in my family, you got ahead or what you were supposed to do, so I manifest it, and I go, well, wait. Or I choose to manifest, I manifest over and over and over again, lots of outward success, lots of material good, because we teach prosperity principles and because that dovetails nicely with what the culture teaches us, and I do all of those things, and then I discover, well, wait, I still feel as though I need to manifest something that fills me up. Oh, so do you see, I am actually being educated, not because the law or spirit is saying, well, you still need to learn this lesson, but because I'm available to, as we grow, we're available to the feedback, and we get to ask ourselves, what does this feedback show me? What does this feedback teach me? What does this feedback invite me to consider? Maybe the answer to my need for fulfillment isn't actually just out there. So what would fulfill me? What's the next level of fulfillment? Oh, maybe it's my contribution. Maybe it's being more of who I am. Maybe it's giving my gift. Maybe it's actually being in service. Maybe it's the giving, not just the receiving, right? And so I think this is so critical. We are so habituated to anthropomorphize in some way this, as though there was something out there that is going to say, you need a lesson in this, so this is what we're going to show you, which is the antithesis of an automatic and impersonal law. And if we could just take responsibility for the fact that we can be actually conscious enough to see the outpicturing and go, wait, I'm going to make a different choice. And so in that respect, yes, the feedback we get, the unpreferred, does in fact push us to the preferred. But because we are available to the insight that comes, to the experience, and we're willing to examine how does it land on us. And the good news, of course, is that we always get to make new choices, right? We're not stuck. We can always make a new choice. Carmen.
I just wanted to say something real quick before we end, is that what you're saying, I just experienced of, you know, as a child, I felt rejected from my mom's family, and they just had a family reunion, and I made a choice to go, and I was in and out, but when I went, I was able to change my story and actually feel accepted and wanted and all those good things, and I ended up deciding to be on the committee for the next family reunion for next year. And then this weekend, yesterday, my cousin lives in Houston, drove down here, all the way from Houston to celebrate my birthday. We haven't celebrated the birthday since I was a kid together. And so she came all the way down here to take me out to dinner and for my birthday. And so that changing.
Yes.
And then her actually making that drive to come see me. It's like how I feel about me being accepted now. I'm actually seeing it out here.
Yes.
So it started from within, and now I'm receiving it, and now I'm accepting it. So, yeah.
Yes, beautiful. And what was the key? You made a new choice. Right? Rather than holding on to the unconscious, they reject me and they don't love me and I don't love them, and then just keeps playing out. Now, right? It just keeps playing out. And so in this way, I think our choices are continually being educated, but it requires us to be conscious and to observe and to see. This is actually the feedback we get, which is actually neutral. It is a mirror into which we're looking. It's just feedback, and we want somebody else to fix it for us, and we all want that. We all want something or someone else to fix it for us, or someone else to have been in charge. And that's why it's so powerful to take radical responsibility, not without blame or shame, right? No blame or shame. This is really, 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 really important. Responsibility without blame and shame. And that in and of itself is a spiritual practice that cleans up a bunch of garbage that's in our unconscious. All right, so we're going to carry on in our celebration, but I think Ryan has some things to tell us about.
Well, I was just going to mention, for those who are dealing with a little bit more of a tougher time with their family this holiday season, Dr. Petra is going to be hosting a workshop that will be happening today after our celebration here, starting at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And it's all about dealing with conflict and communication, and what a perfect way to learn some tools that we could take over the holiday season. So I just want to let you guys know that registration is still available. It is going to be both in person here at the campus in the STEM room and online. If you head over to CSLDallas.org events page, you'll see it for today.
Yeah, please do join me. It's an opportunity for us to engage in all of these things, maybe a little bit differently. Find a new way, a new place to stand with it. All right, I look forward to seeing you in the celebration and in the workshop. Don't forget, we have Thanksgiving celebration and potluck coming up if you're on campus. If you're in the DFW area, we'd love for you to celebrate with us. And in the meantime, have a beautiful Sunday. Bye for now. Yay. Yay, thank you.